Okay. Thanks. All right, so my name is Stephanie Harris, and today I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about CSS Animation, or animating with CSS3 in the browser. But before we get into some live code, I think it's important to talk about what animation is and how you can use it effectively in the browser in a way that enhances the experience of your user. So what is animation? Kind of came up with this on my own, so don't look it up on Webster Dictionary or something right now. But to me, I think animation denotes two things: duration and motion. And you really can't have animation without those two components. Animation kind of gets a bad rap sometimes, I think. When we think of animation, we think of, entertainment. And it's so much more than that, right? Like, if you use animation effectively in the browser, it can really improve your user's experience of the site. It can help guide them through the site and tell them what to do, what to click on, and how to use your product. So first we're going to talk about good animation, and I have a few visual representations of that. Good animation highlights interactive content, right? So here we have an example of Nomad List, which is an awesome site. And it aggregates travel information or information about cities throughout the world for digital nomads. And you'll see as you hover on these two cities, a nice little animation appears. There's a motion, or there's a blur of this image, and you'll see information about each one of these cities comes in from the left to the right, and the graph looks really nice, I think. 2, adds and removes content. So I think everyone at this point has seen an e-commerce website, hopefully. But when you're adding to cart, right, what happens? How does the user know that something has been added to their cart? Does a pop-up appear? Does the quantity in the top right-hand corner increment? Something visual that displays a change has occurred and something has happened. Alerts change in status. So this example is near and dear to my heart. I feel like I know this animation better than my Apple ID because I can never remember the password. But yeah, this is a pretty effective animation in my opinion. It shakes, it tells you, hey, you did something wrong. Like, maybe you should go back and fix that. So good animation can call attention. This is kind of a weird example, but you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner, a pop-up appears and says, someone in Norway or Manhattan or whatever just purchased a pair of glasses, which should entice you to also buy that pair of glasses. And it sounds ridiculous, and it kind of is, but it is very effective and used in marketing all the time. So something to keep in mind for your next e-commerce project. Good animation tells a story and makes things fun. It's kind of my favorite use case, I think. But these guys actually won a Webby Award, which is a pretty prestigious design award for their navigation on their website. And you'll see it takes you through the journey of what these guys do. They're an agency, and they make really awesome web apps and websites for their clients. And this transition is really smooth. As you scroll, it takes you through the journey of what it means to work with Point in a way in their portfolio. Now we're going to touch on bad animation, but we're going to keep this short because #positivity. But I think just the main takeaway here is that not everything has to be animated. Just because you can do it doesn't mean that you should do it. There are a lot of things that are animatable on the web. There's a lot of cool stuff on CodePen, but it doesn't mean that your browser is going to render at the appropriate speed if you do a lot of stuff to it. I have a pretty cool website that I want to show you, WebJank. And I think this showcases what happens when you're doing too much with it. The top right here are the good guys. So these are the ones that are animating at optimal speed. And these guys right here, this is WebJank. You can see like a little glitch in motion. That glitch in motion occurs when your browser is not operating at 60 frames per second rate and causes a frame to drop. So I spent too long playing this weekend. I'm just gonna back to the slides. So what should you animate? If you stick to animating these 4 properties, these 4 CSS properties, you'll be okay. I think that's like a good rule of thumb. Anything else, and you may or may not be in the danger zone. These are the most performant properties to animate. The above don't cause a repaint or recalculation of the layout of your page. So, and now we're going to jump into some coding. So this is the basic syntax for both a transition and a transform in CSS. We have a example class with a transition property on it. It takes in 4 values. The first one is a property, or like something that you want to animate or change. The duration, a timing function, which also known as the ease. If you've seen the words like cubic Bezier on the internet, like that's where you'd put that. And the delay is, if you want to wait 1 second before your animation occurs, that's where you'd put that. We have a hover. We're not using any JavaScript to animate right now, but a hover is the trigger function in CSS, or one of a few. The transform takes in the same property name as you listed in transition. These two work really, really nicely together. I like to think of the transform as the what, and the transition as like the how of your animation, how it's working. And we have one example of this in, one second. This is a code pen. It's a very simple example, but I think it gets the point across. Here we have a circle in CSS, and the transition listed here. You can have multiple transitions on your, or multiple properties that you're manipulating on your transition. So here I have a transform, and here I'm manipulating the background color. And you'll see, as you hover over it, here's a transform. Translate just means to move, and we're moving it 400 pixels to the right. If I were to put in a negative value, this would go to the left. If I type in another value right here, it's going to manipulate the y-axis. So, kind of crazy. All right, so now we're going to talk about keyframes and animation, which also go really nicely together. This is the basic syntax. I think probably look at the bottom one first. We have an idea of example, and we're listing out our animation right here. There's just one way to write it. This is actually the shorthand. You can also list out your animation properties in a more declarative way. State like animation dash name, animation dash duration, and fill in all. Actually, I had to abbreviate these because they wouldn't all fit into the slide. So use your imagination. The from and the to, you can also list those out as percentages. Instead of from and to, I could have written 0 and 100. But all you really need for an animation to occur is 2 different points in time. So I think that's important to remember. The most important part of this, if I haven't already said it, is that the name, that green name right there, has to be the same for both of them. It's not going to work otherwise. And I have an example of this that I made last night. So back to the Apple example. And I wired this up with just a little bit of Angular forms. If I type in an invalid email, it shakes, right? And we'll take a look at the code and see how this is working. So I have an invalid class that is activated when an email is invalid, and that takes in an animation property with a name of shake. Could have called it anything. But it occurs over a duration of 300 milliseconds, and its timing function is an ease in out. Small note here, if you use cubic Bezier, I think I read somewhere online that it's slightly more performant, but ease in out makes it really simple to read. Everyone understands it. And I'm also manipulating the border here, so I'm just changing the color to red. And I manipulated each one of these keyframes. Gotta love them, keyframes. It goes from 0 to 20 to 40. And inside of each one, I'm transforming the x-axis, the motion of the x-axis, and slightly rotating the degrees. So if we go back to this, you can kind of, within this context, see what's happening. Yeah. And that's it. If you're kind of like, I don't know if I'm ever going to mess around with keyframes, like that's not my idea of a good time on Saturday night, that's totally okay. There's this really great resource that I highly recommend. It makes animating things easy. You know, this guy created a bunch of animations, and it's open source, and you can use it at your disposal. So I'll Slack this out. But yeah, that's it. Thank you, guys.